Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Nice to see you all again. Today I'd like to talk a bit about Korean, which might sound a bit odd because I don't speak Korean. And I've never studied it properly either. I think back when I was finishing my Japanese degree many years ago, I bought a book on Korean and, I don't know, spent a week looking at it. But apart from that, I've never studied Korean. So, given that I've never studied it, you might think, well, okay, why are you making a video about it? Basically, I'm going to make a video about Korean today to explain why I completely and utterly lost interest in the idea of ever studying it at all. I've toyed with the idea over the last couple of years. I don't know, it's often when you have an idea, when you think, hey, I could do X, if you don't actually get around to ever actually trying to do X, you don't have any way of trying to evaluate whether you're at all serious about the idea in the first place. So I don't know how close I got to studying Korean at all, but I was considering it. I was considering it, I think, because I was going through a phase when I decided that I had quit Chinese forever. Now I'm going through a phase when I'm actually studying Chinese very intensively again, which tells you something about my ability to perceive whether a decision I've made is real or not. But I was going through a phase when I had decided that I didn't want to study Chinese anymore, but I hadn't lost that language learning bug. I thought maybe I should have a go at Korean. And that was a stupid idea from the get-go, because my Chinese was not contemptible at that point in time, as I recall. So it would have made a hell of a lot more sense to go back to Chinese and get good at that than it would make to start something again from scratch. And that indeed is what I did eventually. But, you know, human beings are weird, fickle, whatever you like. And I was toying with the idea of studying Korean. Why? Good question. Now that this is all evaporated, it's kind of difficult for me to remember exactly why I was interested in it. One thing that motivated me with respect to Korean, maybe I can't say that it interested me, but one thing that motivated me was the knowledge that Korean was actually grammatically very similar to Japanese. And I knew that I would be able to learn it much more quickly, or somewhat more quickly than most Westerners would. I had that going for me. I knew that South Korea was big, K-pop, and okay, I'm not that interested in K-pop. I mean, I'm a middle-aged man, but K-pop, Japanese, Korean dramas, Korean films. I understood that this Korean wave was, I don't know, proving to be quite attractive to many people around the world, and that if I were to learn Korean, that could be useful in some sense for my career, job, whatever you like. So I felt that I had some kind of reason to be interested in Korean. But the idea, and I'm sure that this has happened to all of us at some point in time, the idea just kind of evaporated, and now I can't quite understand why I was interested in it at all, really, subjectively speaking. And I just thought I would talk about that because, hey, why not? Got to talk about something, right? The fact that Korean is somewhat similar to Japanese, grammatically, arguably even very similar to Japanese, this is interesting. Japanese and Korean are not organically related to each other. What I mean by that is that they're not members of the same local branch of the language tree of all humanity. That wasn't a very technical way of putting it, but they're not related in the way that Russian and Polish are. They're not related in the way that French and Italian are. They're not related in the way that, I don't know, Swahili and Luganda are. It appears to be the case that they've existed in such close proximity for such a long time that they have somehow absorbed characteristics from each other, and they have both, of course, also absorbed certain characteristics and also a lot of their respective lexicons from Chinese. So they have ended up being rather similar despite the fact that they're not organically related. That's by the by. To me, that's interesting. But this is, from my perspective, this would have been both a good thing and a bad thing. It would have been a good thing in the sense that it would have made it easier to learn Korean. It would have been a bad thing in the sense that it would probably have made learning Korean a bit boring. I would probably have felt like I was learning Japanese again with a different alphabet. How true would that have been? I don't know, because I never did it. I don't think the grammatical overlap between Japanese and Korean should be overstated. It's obviously pretty strong, but there are obviously areas in which the two languages are quite different as well. So I don't know how that would have played out, but I really didn't like the idea of studying a language that was very similar to Japanese, especially given that I had no interest anymore in improving my Japanese. I didn't want to feel like I was grappling with something that would probably have come across as being some weird, corrupt version of Japanese the whole time. No offense, Koreans. I'm not saying that Korean is really a corrupt version of Japanese, right? So there was that. And there was also the fact that I kind of wanted to go back to Chinese because I felt that it had defeated me a little bit. I don't feel like that anymore because I've gone back to it and made a lot of progress. But at the time, I felt that sort of niggling away at me, this sense that Chinese had defeated me. What I wanted to say, more than anything, is this. I know a lot of people are interested in South Korea these days. I know a lot of people think that it's cool, it's the next big thing. Oh, they have mukbang and bibimbap and whatever, Korean barbecue and cute girls dancing around in music videos. Far be it from me to stereotype the popular culture of a country that I know virtually nothing about. But isn't Korean popular culture kind of naff? Come on, admit it. It's naff. And when it's not naff, it's kind of, I shouldn't say that, it's kind of sickening. A while ago, I started watching some Korean drama on Netflix. I can't remember why, I wasn't really interested. I was just flicking around on Netflix looking for something to watch one evening. Within the first 4 minutes of the first episode of this drama starting, a teenage boy had grotesquely and foully beaten and virtually tortured another teenage boy and had thrown him off the side of a building where, naturally enough, gravity being what it is, he had smashed into the ground and seriously hurt himself. And a high school teacher had just murdered a girl who'd wandered into his room because he had some sort of rat in there that had been bitten by a zombie or something, I can't remember. And the father of the boy who had been thrown off the top of a building had gone to visit him in hospital and decided to beat him to death with a Bible, and had indeed beaten him to death with that very same Bible. Why you'd use a Bible, I have no idea. Maybe they don't have proper blunt objects in Korea. But this is all in the first 4 minutes. And I just thought, what is the matter with these people? I'm probably going to get into trouble for this, but so much of so many of these Korean dramas, the ones I've seen, they either seem to be naff, twee, predictable, silly stories about boy meets girl and boy has a problem with girl, and then eventually boy and girl ride off into the sunset together, or they're grotesquely hyper violent, just horrible, nasty, disturbing excuses for hyper violence on screen. So you have that. Then you have K-pop, which, don't get me wrong, many of the performers are obviously highly competent dancers. I don't know about the quality of their singing. I think it's all auto-tuned these days in any country. But many of them are obviously very good dancers and performers. I understand that a huge amount of attention is paid to that in K-pop. But the music itself isn't it just repackaged Western pop music? Is there anything Korean in it? You get songs that are like 3.5 or 4 minutes long. You have music videos that are, stylistically speaking, just Western music videos. You have 2 boys and 2 girls and they dance around and they're in the desert, and now they're in a meadow with flowers, and now they're in Manhattan, and they change uniforms every time, and one of the people in the band will be a rapper, or there'll be a boy rapper and a girl rapper, and there's the obligatory sort of 8 bars of rap sort of 2/3 of the way through the song. And I think this is just Western pop music in Korean. There's nothing interesting here. And it's also the most garbagey Western pop music. It's the most sort of tediously predictable Western pop music that we have today, where everything consists of the same 3 chord changes. It's amazing listening to, sometimes when I'm on YouTube I listen to some of these sort of classic 80s pop songs. And man, people really wrote songs then. They wrote real songs that were interesting and original and structurally interesting, songs that sounded different to each other. And now everything sounds the same in the West, not only in South Korea. This is just a copy of Western pop music. There's nothing new here. Or I should say, the only new stuff is the amount of plastic surgery on the girls and the amount of makeup on the boys. This quite disturbing desire to take normal human beings and turn them into these hyper beautiful cardboard cutouts where you can't really tell that easily who's who. Yes, okay, sometimes you can tell who's who, but there's obviously a certain face, there's obviously a certain facial type they're aiming for, and to see that realized again and again and again in different people, I think that's really disturbing. To hold that up to so many young people around the world and say, this is perfection, this is what you look like if you're cool, despite the fact that it's not real, despite the fact that even attractive girls go under the knife to be made more attractive. There's a lot of stuff there that I find quite either naff or disturbing or violent or derivative or poisonous in terms of the effect that it must have on young people who watch it. And God knows this stuff isn't limited to South Korea. Please don't misunderstand me. You can find all these trends to a greater or lesser extent in other parts of the world too. But they seem to exist in a peculiarly distilled form there in K-pop. I'm interested in Korean history. I remember reading about the history of the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, when I was in my early 20s, when I was reading a lot of history back at university. If I were to study Korean, I would study it because of some probably unrealistic hope that I could engage more intellectually with the politics, history, political culture of Korea or of that part of the world. I'm too old now, I can't just decide to do things like that, but in principle, I can see why Korea is interesting. I can see why it's important. And I'm talking here about North and South Korea, right? I'm talking about the whole of Korea. If I lived my life differently, I can see how I could have ended up studying Korean and going to live in Korea instead of studying Japanese and going to live in Japan. But those are not things that I did, and they're not things that I can do now because I'm too old. And when you're left with K-pop and people beating their own children to death in hospital beds with Bibles and people murdering their own students because of a rat with a virus in it and all that sort of nonsense in Korean dramas. Yeah, there isn't much there that's very appealing. Even Squid Game was basically just violence porn, I thought. It was pretty watchable. I've watched it in Russian, just to study Russian. I mean, I've watched Squid Game, but all this stuff about how, it's a critique of capitalism and capitalist society. It wasn't. It was just Korean violence porn. I mean, if you took the violence out of Squid Game, you'd have nothing left. If you took out all of this sort of faux intellectual criticism of capitalism and the way it makes us behave, people wouldn't even have batted an eyelid. They would have watched it anyway for the violence, which tells you what it was really about. I did like the scene when they were on the glass bridges. I did enjoy that. That one always raises a smile. But apart from that, no. Korea, no. I think that I will stick to Chinese and Russian and Spanish and the other things I have in my life. If you are studying Korean, my very best wishes to you, and I hope it works out for you. That is it for today. If you want to excoriate me in the comments for being a horrible, evil, racist scumbag who laughs at mukbang and whatever else they do in Korea, then you are very welcome to do so. So, thanks very much, and ciao ciao, bye bye.